I opened my eyes to harsh white lights and the sound of someone rifling through plastic bags. My hospital gown stuck to my sweaty skin, and my head felt like it was filled with cotton. Everything was blurry, moving in slow motion. That's when I saw her. Marlene, my mother-in-law, stood with her back turned, digging through my personal belongings like she owned them. I whispered, my voice hoarse and barely there. "What are you doing?" She jolted, spinning around fast. Too fast for someone who had nothing to hide. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes, the kind of smile that made my stomach turn even through the fog of anesthesia. "Oh, sweetheart, just checking your things. Making sure everything's safe. You're confused from the medication." But I wasn't that confused. I saw it clearly. My house keys were clutched in her fist, the silver catching the fluorescent light. She wasn't putting them back. She was taking them. My throat felt tight. Something was terribly wrong. I tried to sit up, but my body wouldn't cooperate. The room spun, and I fell back against the pillow. Marlene's smile widened as she watched me struggle. The next morning, a nurse with kind eyes leaned down close to my ear. Her voice was barely a whisper, like she was telling me a secret she wasn't supposed to share. "Your mother-in-law asked to take your purse home for safekeeping yesterday. I didn't let her." Something felt off about it. My stomach dropped straight through the hospital bed. My hands were still trembling from the leftover anesthesia, but I reached for my phone on the bedside table. It took 3 tries to unlock it because my fingers wouldn't stop shaking. I opened my banking app, expecting to see my savings account like always. The account I'd been building for 3 years. The money I'd saved from every paycheck, every birthday, every small sacrifice. And there it was. Or rather, there it wasn't. My entire savings. Gone. Completely empty. $0 and 0 cents. The transaction history showed one massive transfer to an account in Marlene's name, dated yesterday, the exact time I was unconscious on the operating table. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. My name is Roxanne. I'm 43 years old, and I've always believed in keeping the peace, even with a woman who hated me from the moment her son introduced us 5 years ago. I remember that first dinner at her house. I wore a blue dress and brought homemade cookies. Marlene took one look at me and told her son, right in front of me, that I seemed too independent to be a good wife. I laughed it off then. I thought she just needed time to warm up to me. But this wasn't about warming up. This wasn't about being controlling or difficult or overprotective. This was theft. This was a declaration of war. I stared at my phone screen at that empty account and something inside me shifted. Something cold and clear and focused. She thought I was helpless right now. Weak. Confused. Too drugged up to notice what she'd done. Good. Let her think that. While my husband was deployed overseas, Marlene inserted herself into everything. My meals, my errands, my home. Always under the guise of helping, of being a caring mother-in-law looking after her son's wife. But she didn't want to help. She wanted to control. I remembered the fights. The small comments that added up over months. "You shouldn't work so much. It makes you look like you don't trust my son to provide." Or, "Women like you don't keep men for long. Too focused on your own life." She'd show up unannounced, rearrange my kitchen cabinets, criticize how I folded laundry. She'd call my husband overseas and complain about me, twisting every innocent thing into evidence that I wasn't good enough for him. I'd bitten my tongue through all of it. I'd smiled and thanked her for her concern. I'd kept the peace because that's what you're supposed to do with family. But now I understood. This wasn't about concern. This was about power. And she just made the biggest mistake of her life. After my emergency surgery for appendicitis, Marlene had swooped in like a vulture circling dying prey. I'd woken up at 6 in the morning to find her already there, arguing with the hospital staff. "I need to be listed as her decision maker," she demanded, her voice sharp and entitled. "I'm family. I have a right to know everything about her condition." The nurse had explained patiently that I already had medical directives in place, that Marlene wasn't authorized to access my records or make decisions. Marlene's face had turned red. She demanded to see a supervisor. She threatened to call the hospital board. She'd made such a scene that security was called. Now I understood why. She'd been trying to gain access to everything. My medical records, my personal belongings, my financial information. The key transfer wasn't spontaneous. This had been planned. She'd been waiting for an opportunity like this. A moment when I'd be vulnerable, weak, unable to fight back. She thought she'd found the perfect chance. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor, Caroline. She lived 3 doors down and had a spare key for emergencies. Your mother-in-law is at your house. She said she's cleaning for you while you recover. Wanted to make sure you knew. My heart pounded. I texted back fast, my fingers clumsy on the screen. Did you let her in? No, she used a key. I thought you gave it to her. The key she'd stolen from my hospital room. She was already inside my house, going through my things. But she wasn't cleaning. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was searching for documents, PIN numbers, passwords written down anywhere. She was looking for anything else she could take, anything else she could use. I thought about my jewelry box in the bedroom, my grandmother's ring, the silver bracelet my husband had given me on our wedding day. What else was she taking while I lay here, trapped in this hospital bed? That afternoon, the texts started coming in. My husband's aunt, his cousin, his grandmother, all saying the same thing in different words. Marlene told us you're not handling things well. She said she's stepping in to help manage your finances. She was spinning the narrative, casting herself as the hero. The concerned mother-in-law taking care of her poor, unstable daughter-in-law who couldn't be trusted with her own money. My hands clenched around my phone. Rage burned hot in my chest, making it hard to breathe. I wanted to call every single one of them and scream the truth. I wanted to expose her right now, immediately, before she could spread more lies. But I didn't. I swallowed that rage down, forcing it into a small, cold place inside me. Let her talk. Let her tell everyone her version of the story. Let her feel confident and safe and untouchable. Because people who think they've already won always get sloppy. They make mistakes. And I was going to document every single one. I pretended to be too exhausted to talk when Marlene visited that evening. I kept my eyes half closed, my responses short and mumbled. I acted exactly like someone too drugged up and confused to understand what was happening. Don't you worry about anything, she said, patting my hand like I was a child. I'm taking care of everything. You just focus on getting better. I nodded weakly and closed my eyes. She stayed for 10 more minutes, then left, satisfied that I was completely out of it. The moment she was gone, I reached under my pillow for the small notebook I'd asked the nurse to bring me. On the first page, I wrote in clear letters, document everything. Then I started writing. Every detail I could remember. Times, dates, conversations. The stolen keys. The emptied account. The text to family members. The unauthorized visit to my house. People who thought they'd gotten away with something always got careless. They stopped covering their tracks. They got greedy. I just needed to stay quiet and let her dig her own grave. Over the next 2 days, I built my evidence trail from that hospital bed. Screenshots of the money transfers saved to 3 different cloud accounts. Screenshots of her texts claiming I was mentally unstable. Dates and times carefully recorded. I called the hospital administration and requested copies of my medical records. Every page that showed exactly when I was sedated, when I was unconscious, and when I was physically incapable of authorizing any financial transactions. The records proved everything. They showed that at the exact moment my savings were transferred to Marlene's account, I was under general anesthesia, legally incapacitated, unable to consent to anything. She'd stolen from a sedated woman. She'd taken advantage of someone who was literally unconscious on an operating table. Good luck spinning that into a story where she was the hero. I saved every document, every screenshot, every piece of evidence in multiple places. My phone, my laptop, 2 separate cloud storage accounts, and a USB drive I asked Caroline to keep safe for me. On my 3rd day in the hospital, a new alert appeared on my phone. I stared at it, my mouth going dry. New credit card opened in your name. My hands shook as I clicked through to see the details. Maximum credit limit. And it had already been maxed out. A cash advance for $15,000, taken yesterday. The application had been submitted using my social security number, my address, and a forged signature. I pulled up the transaction history. The cash had been withdrawn from an ATM 3 blocks from Marlene's house at 9 in the morning, right around the time she would have been awake and planning her day. I actually laughed. A short, harsh sound that made the nurse look at me with concern. Marlene wasn't just greedy. She was stupid. She was leaving a trail so obvious that a child could follow it. She's digging her own grave, I whispered to myself, and she had no idea the ground was already giving way beneath her feet. My husband was still deployed. He wouldn't be reachable for another 3 weeks. Communication blackouts were standard during this phase of his assignment. I couldn't call him, couldn't email him, couldn't tell him what his mother had done. Marlene knew this. She planned everything around his absence. She thought my isolation meant she was safe, that by the time he came home, she'd have everything locked down, every lie in place, every stolen dollar hidden or justified. She thought I'd be too weak or too scared or too confused to fight back on my own. That was her second mistake. Her first was stealing from me. Her second was underestimating me. I had 3 weeks before my husband could intervene. 3 weeks before Marlene would expect any consequences. But you should never rob someone who has this much time to think. Time to plan. Time to gather evidence and build an airtight case. 3 weeks was more than enough. On Sunday, Marlene went to church. Our church. The one my husband and I attended every week before his deployment. She stood up during testimony time, her voice trembling with fake emotion. Please pray for my daughter-in-law, Roxanne. She's been through so much, and I'm worried about her mental state. She's not herself right now. I'm trying to help her, to take care of her affairs until she's well again. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. The congregation murmured sympathetically. Several people nodded, their faces full of concern for poor Marlene, carrying such a heavy burden. But Caroline in the third row held up her phone. Recording. Caroline, my neighbor who happened to attend same church with me, and my husband sensed something was off. So she wanted me to see what Marlene did in church today. That night, the video appeared in my messages. Sent by Caroline with just 2 words, thought you'd want this. I saved it immediately. Proof. Real-time manipulation captured on camera. Her performing her sympathy tour, painting me as unstable while she robbed me blind. I was released from the hospital on Tuesday. Caroline drove me home, helping me up the front steps because I was still sore and weak from surgery. The moment I walked through my front door, I felt it. The violation. Like someone had been breathing in my space, touching my things, leaving their fingerprints on my life. Papers on my desk were rearranged. Drawers in the kitchen hung open slightly. Personal items had been moved, not quite put back in the right places. I walked slowly to my bedroom, my stomach tight with dread. My jewelry box sat on the dresser. I opened it with shaking hands. Empty. Completely empty. My grandmother's ring gone. The silver bracelet from my wedding gone. The pearl necklace my husband had given me on our first anniversary gone. Another theft. Not for money this time, but for spite. For control. To take pieces of my life and make them hers. I stood there, staring at that empty box, and something inside me turned to ice. On Thursday, a letter arrived. Official looking, from a legal services company I'd never heard of. I opened it with Caroline standing beside me, her face anxious. Inside was a copy of a document, a power of attorney form, claiming that due to my medical incapacity and unstable mental state, Marlene was being granted temporary authority over my financial and medical decisions. My signature appeared at the bottom, except it wasn't my signature. It was close, but the loops were wrong. The pressure was different. Anyone who actually knew my handwriting would spot the forgery immediately. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I started laughing. Real laughter this time, dark and sharp and a little bit unhinged. Caroline looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Roxanne, are you okay? She forged a power of attorney, I managed between laughs. She actually forged a legal document and filed it. That wasn't just theft anymore. That wasn't just fraud. That was a felony. Multiple felonies. She's not just greedy, I said, wiping tears from my eyes. She's delusional. The next morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mrs. Hayes? This is Brandon Tucker. I work at First National Bank. His voice sounded young and shaken. I think I need to talk to you about your mother-in-law. My heart started pounding. Go on. She came in last week. Before your surgery. She was asking questions about your accounts, trying to get information. My supervisor told her we couldn't discuss your accounts without you present. He paused. Then yesterday, she came back. With Karen, one of our newer tellers. She convinced Karen to process some transactions that looked wrong to me. What kind of transactions? Transfers from your account. Karen thought the power of attorney document was legitimate. I reported it to my manager this morning. I wanted you to know. My hands were shaking. Would you be willing to provide a statement about what happened? Official documentation. Yes. No hesitation. What she did was wrong. Karen's really young, just started last month. Your mother-in-law intimidated her. I had my first true witness. Someone inside the bank, willing to testify to Marlene's manipulation and fraud. Thank you, Brandon, I said quietly. You have no idea how much this means. Over the next week, I healed. My body grew stronger, the pain from surgery fading to a dull ache. But more importantly, I healed mentally, emotionally, strategically. I organized all my evidence into 3 folders: medical, financial, behavioral. The medical folder contained my hospital records, proving I was unconscious when the theft occurred. It contained the forged power of attorney, with notes documenting the differences in handwriting and signature. The financial folder held bank statements, transaction histories, credit card applications, and Brandon's written statement from the bank. Every dollar stolen, every fraudulent transfer, every piece of identity theft, documented in clear detail. The behavioral folder was Marlene's own words. Screenshots of her text claiming I was mentally unstable. The church video where she publicly performed her concerned mother-in-law act. Messages to family members spinning her narrative. I locked all 3 folders in a fireproof box and hid it in Caroline's garage. Copies existed in the cloud, on my laptop, on 2 USB drives. Marlene thought she'd covered her tracks. She had no idea she'd left breadcrumbs everywhere. I contacted an elder law attorney named Vincent Price. When I explained what happened, he went quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Mrs. Hayes, he finally said, his voice careful and controlled. What you're describing is financial elder abuse, identity theft, forgery, and fraud. These are serious criminal charges. I know. She stole from you while you were sedated in a hospital. She forged legal documents. She opened credit accounts in your name. He paused. She's looking at potential prison time. Good. He laid out my options. Civil court to recover the money. Criminal charges through the district attorney. Restraining orders. I listened to every word, taking notes. The evidence you've gathered is extensive, he said. Most people don't think this clearly right after being victimized. She thinks I'm too weak to fight back. I need her to keep thinking that. Then we'll prepare everything quietly. And when you're ready, we'll strike. Marlene was still walking around free, still telling people her lies, still feeling safe and untouchable. Perfect. Stay arrogant, I thought. Just a little longer. 2 weeks after my surgery, I was strong enough to host a small family dinner. I invited my husband's aunt, his uncle, his grandmother, and his 2 cousins. People Marlene had been feeding her lies to. And I invited Marlene. She arrived with a casserole and a pitying smile. Roxanne, sweetheart, you shouldn't be pushing yourself like this. Let me help you in the kitchen. I'm fine, I said, smiling back. The doctor said gentle activity is good for recovery. We sat down to eat. I asked simple questions. Innocent questions. Questions only a thief would panic over. Marlene, when did you say you visited me in the hospital? I'm having trouble remembering the timeline. She shifted in her seat. Oh, several times. You were so out of it, poor thing. And you helped move some of my things? For safekeeping. Just trying to help. Her voice was tight. That's so kind. Where did you put everything? I'm still trying to find some items. She blinked rapidly. I'm sure they're around. You know how moving things can be confusing. Around the table, family members were starting to look at her strangely. Her answers were too vague, too defensive. She was sweating, actually sweating, dabbing at her forehead with a napkin. Dessert was served. Marlene had relaxed slightly, thinking the uncomfortable questions were over. That's when I made my move. I'm so grateful you were there for me, I said, looking right at her. Taking care of my house while I was hospitalized. Of course, dear. That's what family does. Although I have to admit, I was confused about something. I kept my voice light and curious. Caroline said she saw you at my house the day after my surgery. But you told everyone at church that you never stepped foot inside. That you respected my privacy. The room went silent. Every eye turned to Marlene. Her face went pale, then red, then pale again. I don't remember saying that. Maybe you misheard. Maybe. I pulled out my phone. Caroline actually took a photo. She wanted to document who was coming and going, just to keep my house safe. She sent it to me yesterday. I turned the screen around. Clear as day, there was Marlene unlocking my front door. The timestamp showed the date and time. Someone gasped. Might have been the aunt. Marlene's mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. She looked like a fish drowning in air. So you did go inside? There must be some mistake. Her voice was barely a whisper. I set my phone down and reached into the folder beside my chair. Time to stop playing gentle. Let's clear up a few more misunderstandings, then. I pulled out printed bank statements. These show that my entire savings account was emptied while I was unconscious on the operating table. Transferred to an account in your name. I slid them across the table. My husband's grandmother picked them up, her hands trembling as she read. Her face went hard. The timestamps here, I pointed, match exactly with my medical records. Records that show I was under general anesthesia, legally incapacitated, unable to authorize any transaction. Marlene opened her mouth, but no sound came out. There's also this. I pulled out the credit card statements. A new credit card, opened in my name. Maxed out immediately. Cash advance withdrawn from an ATM near your house. I laid down more papers. The forged power of attorney. Brandon's statement from the bank. Screenshots of her texts claiming I was mentally unstable. The silence in that room was absolute. Marlene's voice came out as a croak. There's been a misunderstanding. No, I said quietly. There's been a theft. I'd saved the best for last. I looked around the table at my husband's family. People who'd believed Marlene's lies. I've already submitted everything to the bank's fraud department. They've launched an internal investigation. I've also provided this evidence to an attorney who specializes in financial crimes and elder abuse. Marlene's face crumbled. You're trying to destroy me. I'm trying to get back what you stole. The aunt stood up suddenly, her chair scraping back. Marlene, tell me this isn't true. She's making it all up. She's always hated me. She's trying to turn everyone against me. But her own words betrayed her. The desperation, the panic, the way she couldn't look anyone in the eye. The grandmother, who'd been quiet this whole time, set down the bank statements with shaking hands. How could you do this to her? While she was in the hospital, while my grandson is deployed. I was helping. She needed help managing her money. By stealing it? The uncle's voice was ice cold. The room erupted. Everyone talking at once, voices raised, shock and anger and betrayal. Marlene was crying now, real tears, screaming that I'd set her up, that this was all lies. But nobody was listening to her anymore. The consequences came fast. The bank froze Marlene's accounts pending their fraud investigation. When she tried to use her credit card the next day to buy groceries, it was declined. Insufficient funds. Her own credit cards, the ones she'd been using freely for years, suddenly stopped working. The bank had flagged her as a fraud risk. Within a week, word had spread through her church group. The same people who'd prayed for her, who'd sympathized with her heavy burden, now whispered when she walked past. Some turned away entirely. Her friends stopped calling, stopped inviting her to lunch dates and book clubs. Nobody wanted to be associated with someone who'd robbed their own family. Her siblings called me one by one, apologizing, horrified, promising they'd had no idea. And Marlene? She called me 17 times in 3 days. Left voicemails that started angry, turned desperate, ended with begging. I didn't answer once. She thought she could survive the storm she created. She didn't know I was the storm. The biggest consequence came from somewhere Marlene never expected. The state. When she filed that fraudulent power of attorney, she triggered a mandatory review. The legal services company had reported the discrepancies in my signature. An investigation was launched automatically. Vincent called me with the news. The state takes this seriously. Forging legal documents to gain control over someone's finances is a major red flag for elder abuse. But I'm only 43. Doesn't matter. Financial abuse is financial abuse. And she attempted to gain legal authority over you through fraud. He paused. She's been flagged in the state system. She's now barred from being appointed power of attorney or guardian for anyone in the state. Permanently. Marlene's name would be in that database forever, marked as someone who'd attempted financial fraud against a vulnerable person. She'd wanted control so badly. Now she'd lost any legal path to ever having it again. Her reputation was destroyed. Her access to family finances was permanently revoked. Her church community had abandoned her. I watched it all unfold with a strange sense of emptiness. Not satisfaction, not joy, just closure. She'd made her choices. These were the consequences. 3 weeks after that dinner, I got my money back. All of it. The bank's fraud investigation concluded that the transactions were unauthorized and made while I was legally incapacitated. They reversed every transfer, every withdrawal. The credit card company did the same. The $15,000 cash advance was wiped from my record, and Marlene was held liable for the debt. They also paid me compensation for the identity theft. $5,000 for the emotional distress and time spent resolving the fraud. With that money, plus my recovered savings, I finally had enough for the down payment on the house I'd been dreaming about. A small craftsman with a garden and a front porch. Far enough from Marlene's neighborhood that I'd never accidentally run into her. I closed on it 2 weeks later. Spent days painting the walls soft colors that made me happy. Hung curtains I'd picked out myself. Planted flowers in the garden. My husband came home a week after I moved in. He walked through the door in his uniform, dropped his bag, and just stared. I told him everything over the phone once communication opened. He'd been furious, devastated, proud, and protective all at once. Now he pulled me close and said, "I'm so sorry I wasn't here." "I handled it," I said quietly. And I had. I blocked Marlene's number, her email, her social media, every possible way she could contact me. She tried to reach out through other family members, sent letters that I returned unopened. She wanted to explain, to apologize, to make me understand. I didn't want to hear it. There would be no forgiveness arc, no tearful reconciliation, no second chances, just freedom. My husband supported the decision completely. She stole from you while you were unconscious. I don't care if she's my mother. That's unforgivable. We never spoke to her again. We celebrated holidays with his grandmother, his aunt and uncle, the family members who'd stood by us. Marlene wasn't invited, wasn't mentioned, became a ghost we'd left behind. I stood on my front porch one Sunday morning, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint my garden gold. The house was mine, bought with money I'd saved and recovered, decorated exactly how I wanted, a space that was truly, completely mine. I thought about that hospital room, about waking up to find her stealing my keys, about the violation and betrayal and rage. I didn't just get my money back, I whispered to the morning air. I got my power back. Sometimes karma doesn't make you wait. Sometimes it arrives the moment you decide you deserve better. And sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to let someone steal your life twice. If you like this story, please like this video. Hit the subscribe button to this channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. There is always another story worth hearing.